In May, the Infected Blood Inquiry will publish its final report. In today's episode for series Blood Matters, Blanche Girouard looks at the role of doctors in what has become known as the worst scandal in the history of the NHS.
So far in this series, we've heard how a new American blood clotting product allowed children with haemophilia to lead near normal lives.
We could actually go on holiday. We'd never sought to venture away from the vicinity of the Children's Hospital in Birmingham before that.
And we've heard how some batches of that product carried HIV and hepatitis, infecting the young boys it was meant to help.
The other 2 lads died of AIDS and 2 died of hepatitis. And there's just me now.
But some patients didn't find out for years about having been infected, even though their doctors already knew.
I left my GP and walked very slowly back, and it just felt like a whole world had fallen apart.
And even today, it's not clear why some in the medical profession thought it okay to withhold that information.
It was another era. It was doctor knows best, and patients would have that same attitude, oh, doctor knows best.
I'm Blanche Girouard, and I've followed the NHS blood contamination scandal for years, listening to the stories of the infected and affected as they wait for justice. More than 4 decades on, they're still waiting. For BBC Radio 4, this is Blood Matters, Episode 3, Doctor Knows Best. Richard Warwick, whom we first met in Episode 1, had been diagnosed as a young child with haemophilia, the genetic condition that meant he lacked the essential blood clotting protein, so that even a small injury would cause massive blood loss. At the age of 9, he was treated for his bleeding with an imported blood product from the US, known as Factor VIII. By the time he left school at 16, he was already unwell.
It was summer holidays, and I had a severe fit in bed at home. And they couldn't understand what was wrong, Obviously it was an epileptic seizure of some description. I was just falling over in the street and cutting my head open, which isn't good at the best of times for someone with haemophilia. So it was quite a scary time.
But despite his epileptic seizures, Richard went to technical college near his home in Scarborough and did computer studies and electronics, 2 of his passions in life. And then he spotted his dream job at a local printing company.
They offered it to me on the spot as a systems analyst, and it was great. I loved it. I couldn't wait to get to work in the morning.
This was the mid-1980s, and the British media was warning of a new deadly virus coming from the US, HIV, which could cause AIDS.
And within a very short period of time, although I was doing everything that was asked of me, I was pulled to one side one day, and they said, Richard, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to let you go. And they didn't give any reason as to why, but I think, although I'd explained to them when I had the interview that I had haemophilia, and of course it was just about around that time that it was starting to hit the headlines between haemophilia and HIV. We had the Daily Mail article, Killer Blood, and other items in the press that were coming to the fore.
In May 1983, the Daily Mail had run a story under the headline "Hospitals Using Killer Blood," suggesting a link between this new virus and American blood products used in the treatment of haemophilia. The paper said that 2 men were in hospital in London and Cardiff suspected to be suffering from the disease after treatment for haemophilia.
So I think what they'd done is that they decided that I could pose a risk to other employees, and they decided just to let me go, which was devastating.
Despite having lost his dream job and still suffering from nasty seizures, things began to look up for Richard at the age of 21, when he met Tina. They dated for a year, then got engaged. The following year, Richard went for what he thought would be a routine GP appointment.
Towards the end of the consultation, he turned around and said to me, "You do know you're HIV positive, Richard, don't you?" And I said, "No, I didn't know that." And my heart just started pounding as I realised what that meant. So I left my GP and walked very slowly back to Tina's mum and dad's house, and I told her, and it just felt like a whole world had fallen apart at that point.
Tina, do you remember him coming home that night?
I do remember him saying, well, I'm HIV positive now, and I thought, oh, that's it then, you know. And then, of course, you think about children and getting on, and, well, we just thought that he wasn't going to live for very long, so...
I still can't believe to this day that it withheld that information from me for so long.
Because I believe you have your medical notes, and what do they reveal about when you actually became infected?
Well, I know now when I became infected, which was 78, but I was actually tested in December 84, and I wasn't told until 88.
And were you tested more than once?
On numerous occasions, I think I was tested, yeah.
Were you told at any point why you were being tested?
No.
Richard's case is not unusual. It's now clear that many of those who were infected with contaminated blood products were tested for HIV without their knowledge, and weren't told of their infection for many years. It's hard now to understand how this can have happened. To find out more about the culture of medical practitioners in those years, I spoke to two doctors who'd given evidence to the public inquiry.
I'm Professor Tuddenham. I'm a haematologist, and I first became a director of a large, busy haemophilia centre in London in 1978.
Edward Tuddenham worked at the Royal Free Hospital in London, where, he says, they had more than 100 haemophiliac patients at any one time. He remembers being encouraged by American pharmaceutical companies to buy their Factor VIII product when supplies of the UK-made blood product ran short.
I can remember very, very lavish dinners. Big Pharma is ultimately cash-driven. I mean, of course, it does a lot of wonderful research, and I've worked with Big Pharma, but once they had a concentrate they'd invested in, they were enthusiastic to sell it, and we needed it, and we bought it.
What I felt quite strongly was a lot of our education actually came from the pharmaceutical companies themselves. And this is because NHS did not fund the education that we should have had.
Professor Liaquat Ali Parapia was a consultant in haemophilia at Bradford Royal Infirmary from 1981 and director of the Haemophilia Centre there. He also recalls being urged to buy the American Factor VIII concentrate.
The perceived image of the product was that it was better and that we were being progressive by using it.
But as we've already heard in this series, the product that came from America was drawn from large pools of donors who, unlike the donors in the UK, were being paid to give their blood. Donor centres were often set up in run-down inner-city areas of America where prostitutes, drug users and alcoholics could sell their blood. The first reported case of a man with haemophilia dying of AIDS was in the United States in 1982. So, back in the United Kingdom, how did haemophilia centres like Bradford deal with the prospect that Factor VIII might be carrying infectious diseases, such as the HIV virus?
Some directors said, oh, it's only one case, nobody should panic, it's safe, etc. America, there were more cases than in Britain, but there wasn't enough to shut everything down. But as the information came through, then things were shut down.
And what about Professor Tuddenham at the Royal Free?
I would say we were making choices with the risk in mind, and where we had children, most of our children at the Royal Free were treated with the UK-made Factor VIII concentrate, and as a consequence, far fewer of them actually became infected with HIV. Also, if patients were less frequently treated, we'd put them on the UK concentrate. Patients who'd used very large amounts of whatever Factor VIII was around, including imported, well, the feeling was, that's most likely you've already been exposed to this infection, but we'll carry on with whatever treatment we can get for you, which meant imported concentrate.
When a reliable test for HIV became available in 1984, both Professors Parapia and Tuddenham contend that they made sure patients were told immediately, or soon after, about test results, And, they say, they did warn patients of the risks of HIV as soon as they knew that they existed. But that, from what we have heard, was not a uniform approach.
We had a policy, at least at the Royal Free, which was a kind of open, we're in this together approach. What other centres were very similar, I know, but some much less so.
Well, the practice varied considerably. You know, the culture was different then. Now you can't do things without telling patients, but at that time the culture was very different. The doctors were, in a sense, kings. You know, they decided, if you come and see me, I know what's good for you.
Yeah, it was another era. It was, you know, we know best, doctor knows best, and patients would have that same attitude, oh, doctor knows best.
When you finished giving evidence to the inquiry, you broke down and apologised to your patients. What were you apologising for?
I was sorry that these things happened. Could it have been better? Yes, I'm sorry, but possibly if I hadn't rushed into treating them with commercial Factor VIII and so on. But the pressure was incredible. Could I have done better? Probably, yes. Many of us could have.
And that's something that Richard and Tina Warwick would agree with. A lot could and should have been done better. In 1989, a year after Richard was eventually told that he was HIV positive, Tina became pregnant unexpectedly. The couple were almost immediately advised not to continue with the pregnancy because of the risk that the child could be infected with HIV. It's a decision which haunts them to this day.
Yeah, at the time, I was given 2 or 3 years to live, maximum. There was no treatment, no medication, no drugs that could control the HIV. So either I would pass away and leave Tina on her own, or, you know, the child would not make it and I would not make it and Tina would be left with neither. So it was a no-brainer, really, I think.
Well, when you realise that you're never going to hold your own baby, and it seemed, if I can use the word, an easy decision at the time because it was inevitable, but I always knew that it would sort of come back, you know, and bite me on the bum, and as I got older it has done, you know, I've thought more and more about it, but at the time we just had to just get on with it, and we had enough to face on our plates, so that was that.
Next time on Blood Matters, how one family struggled to cope not just with their baby having been infected with HIV, but also with the stigma that carried.
People would, if they saw us, would cross the road. Oh, we had AIDS dead written on the side of the house, great big black letters. We moved in the end.
Blood Matters was presented by Blanche Girouard. The producer was Mike Lanchin, and the series is a CTVC production for BBC Radio 4. Details of organisations that can provide help and support with some of the issues raised in this programme are available at bbc.co.uk/actionline.